They came without warning, their dragon-headed ships slicing through the icy waters. By the time the first light of dawn broke, the serene silence of monasteries turned into the deafening clash of swords and the crackle of flames. Did you know that Viking raids over the course of just 2 centuries led to the looting of more? But how did this relentless clash between 2 polar opposites, a band of pagan warriors? Today we're uncovering the bloody reality behind the Viking raids on monasteries. When you think of monks, you might picture tranquil lives dedicated to prayer, quiet reflection, and the preservation of knowledge. Now imagine that world interrupted by the brutal force of Viking raiders, armed with axes, shields, and a fierce hunger for treasure. For nearly 300 years, Viking longships terrorized the coasts of Europe, and monasteries were among their favorite targets. Why monasteries, you ask? Because they were rich, isolated, and utterly defenseless. For the Vikings, it was like a treasure chest begging to be broken open. For the monks, it was a nightmare beyond comprehension. This wasn't just a series of isolated raids. It was a cultural collision that challenged the values and faith. The conflict between Vikings and monks wasn't just about raiding and pillaging. On one side you had the Vikings, seafaring warriors from Scandinavia whose pagan beliefs celebrated strength. On the other, the monks, men devoted to peace, spirituality, and the written word. Monasteries symbolized the heartbeat of early medieval Europe. They were spiritual sanctuaries, centers of education, and hubs for preserving ancient knowledge. But they were also repositories of wealth, golden chalices, jewel-encrusted relics, and beautifully adorned manuscripts. To the Vikings, this wealth was irresistible. The first major Viking raid on a monastery occurred in 793 CE at Lindisfarne, an island off the northeast coast of England. The attack was so sudden, so devastating, that it left the Christian world in shock. Churches were burned, monks were killed or enslaved, and treasures were hauled back to Scandinavia. This raid wasn't an isolated incident. It marked the beginning of the Viking Age, a period defined by relentless raids and deep fear across Europe. To understand why monasteries became such prime targets, we need to look at the broader historical context. The 8th and 9th centuries were times of great change. The Vikings, facing population pressure and limited resources in their homeland, turned to the seas in search of wealth and opportunity. Their longships gave them unparalleled mobility, allowing them to strike quickly and disappear before local defenses could muster. But why target monasteries specifically? The answer lies in their dual vulnerability and wealth. Monasteries were often located in remote areas, far from the protection of cities or armies. This isolation made them easy prey. Moreover, monasteries were treasure troves of valuables, from golden altarpieces to silver goblets. These riches were a magnet for Viking raiders. Take Lindisfarne, for example. This remote island was home to one of England's most important religious centers. It held precious relics, intricate manuscripts, and a steady supply of agricultural produce. When the Vikings attacked, they not only plundered its wealth, but also sent a chilling message. But the loss wasn't just material. Monasteries were also centers of learning. The destruction of their libraries meant the loss of priceless manuscripts, centuries of knowledge reduced to ashes. The psychological impact was equally devastating. For a deeply religious society, the desecration of holy places was a sign of divine punishment, adding fear and uncertainty to an already chaotic world. While many Viking raids were brief and brutal, some encounters escalated into full-scale conflicts. One of the most dramatic examples was the Siege of Paris in 845 CE. Though not strictly a monastery raid, it exemplified the Vikings' devastating tactics and the vulnerability of Christian Europe. Led by the legendary Viking chief Ragnar Lothbrok, a fleet of 120 ships sailed up the Seine River, targeting the heart of the Frankish Empire. Paris, a thriving city with monasteries and churches brimming with treasures, became their prime target. The Vikings overwhelmed local defenses, sacked churches, and captured hundreds of hostages. Among them were monks whose fates often ended in slavery or execution. King Charles the Bald, desperate to save his city, paid the Vikings a massive ransom, 7,000 pounds of silver. The payment was enough to bankrupt his treasury, but it spared Paris from complete destruction. For the Vikings, it was a resounding victory, demonstrating their ability to bring even the mightiest kingdoms to their knees. Monasteries and religious sites could no longer rely on their spiritual significance for protection. Kings and clergy began fortifying their lands, building castles, and organizing armies. The age of defenseless monasteries was coming to an end, but not without immense bloodshed and cultural loss. The clashes between Vikings and monks weren't just battles. They were symbols of a broader cultural transformation. As the raids intensified, they forced a blending of pagan and Christian worlds. Some Viking leaders, like Guthrum and Harold Bluetooth, eventually converted to Christianity, integrating elements of both cultures. Monks, too, adapted in the face of adversity. In Ireland, for example, monasteries became fortified settlements, complete with high walls and watchtowers. This resilience allowed them to preserve their traditions and even expand their influence in later centuries. But the scars of the Viking raids were long-lasting. They shaped European politics, economy, and religious practices. The fear of future attacks prompted reforms in military organization, leading to the rise of feudalism. Economically, the influx of stolen wealth fueled Viking settlements and trade networks, linking Scandinavia to the rest of Europe and beyond. The bloody encounters between Vikings and monks were far more than isolated incidents. They were turning points in history, representing the collision of two worlds, one rooted in conquest, the other in faith. These clashes reshaped medieval Europe, leaving behind a legacy of destruction, resilience, and cultural exchange. The Vikings may have come seeking wealth, but they left behind a transformed continent, and while the monks suffered immensely, their perseverance ensured that their faith and knowledge endured. These battles were a testament to both the fragility and the strength of human civilization. What do you think? Could the Vikings and monks have coexisted? Or were their worlds destined to collide? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by Viking history, don't miss our next video on the incredible rise and fall of Ragnar Lothbrok, coming soon. Hit that like button, share this with fellow history buffs, and subscribe for more epic tales from the past. This is History Replay, this day